Cool. So thank you guys for being here. This is an optional support training. There has been a lot of upgrades since the first BEDucator program was released to Big Burn last year. So Saguaro Man is really special because we, as BED, most of the people who formed BED way back in 2004, they live here either in Tucson or in Phoenix. So the BEDucator program going online was first released to Saguaro Man, and we've had some updates since then. And we want to make sure that this is like a full discourse for the support training. I will be able to see the chat. So you guys feel free to come off mute if there's any questions and put my attention towards there if I'm not seeing anything. So this is our support training. So for the BEDucator program, we have done some upgrades. If you have already logged in and watched all of the videos, you may have noticed that it's changed a little bit, and we have included a workbook. This training is going to be specific for Saguaro Man. So if there is anybody in here for Big Burn, we're going to have this specifically be lingo towards Saguaro Man because most of the educators in here are prepping for the event at the end of the month. So for our meeting etiquette, we do want to have our mics muted. So if you're working on something in the back and it's causing a lot of noise, we just don't want to disrupt the rest of the training if people have questions. But feel free to come off of your mics or off of mute if you have any questions, because we want to encourage discourse. This is going to go for an hour to be respectful of everyone's time. If you need to hop off at 7:30 for whatever reason, don't even need to say anything. Just go on ahead and pop on out because that's all that we scheduled it for. So a lot of the BEDucator program, it is digital content just because we have such a wider reach now. If it's okay with everyone for this to be used to go onto YouTube to help educators for Big Burn and everyone feels comfortable with it, then we can use the content as a support training for other educators to watch too. But that's only if everyone feels comfortable with it. And if not, you can email me at momo@bedtalks.org and just privately let me know that you don't want your name or your voice being put into any of the program. So most of us know what BED is, but just in case there's some new burners that are in this training, a quick rundown. Like I said earlier, BED was formed back in 2004, and the story that I was told was there was a woman who was assaulted at Burning Man, and when she went to a lead to say, hey, this thing happened to me, the response was, that doesn't happen here at Burning Man after going through a sexual assault. So with that response, BED was formed to be a sexual assault prevention organization, and we are nested under Big Burn's emergency services. Some of the things that we do for Burning Man is help write the survival guide, specifically for the section that's on consent. We have previously gone all across the playa giving BED talks where we do consent education at the beginning of Burn. So that way people know that consent is a principle and something that we focus on as a community. We have since changed that over to the BEDucator program. Since all of the volunteers who are doing the BED talks, there was so much that we had to pack into one talk. It was way too long, and trying to hold the attention of burners ready to go out and party for a full hour was really tough. So you, as the educator, are doing your part in practicing consent within our culture. One of the things that we do for Big Burn, and I'd love to get your guys' feedback on how we could do this for our regional burn, is we have a BED Think Pink map. And this is a way that we recognize the neighborhoods at Burning Man to show, hey, there's educated camps in this area. I know last year we had Chelsea with Not a Sex Cult post their consent policy and their problem resolution process. So that way, if people were walking around, they knew that that was a educated camp. There was a educator from Big Burn last year who said that they don't walk around the city unless they have someone with them. But knowing where the other educated camps were allowed them to feel safe enough to go out and which camps were okay to go into. So that recognition of having done this program has been empowering to some people that wouldn't walk the playa on their own. So thank you guys for doing this program. It's meant a lot to the other educators over at Big Burn. And I know it means a lot to the educators that are here in Arizona as well. So, who is a educator? That's you. A educator is just the camp level consent educator. So that's not full pressure for you to know everything that there is to know about consent and then teaching it to the rest of your camp. The Bureau of Erotic Discourse, discourse meaning to have a conversation, is you at the camp level. So you don't have to be a TCO, theme camp organizer. It could be your very first burn. And then you can raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a beducator. So you can get with the rest of your theme camp organizers to go through the BEDucator program. The BEDucator program in a nutshell is you watch the BEDucator program, you're going to create your own unique consent policy. We're not telling you what it is. It's up to you guys to have that discourse and see what your camp's unique flavor is going to be when it comes to creating your unique consent policy. We also give you a consent enforcement process. You can name it whatever you want. I know one of our educators was like, we don't like the word enforcement. Feel free to change it to whatever that is going to work for your camp and have the freedom to really make this program your own with you and your leads. The last portion is giving a bed talk. The reason why we give a bed talk is because not everybody joins all of the meetings, but when you're at the event, you can capture as many people within your camp as you possibly can who may have missed any pre-meetings or if someone just kind of slid into your camp at the very end. That happens all of the time. So I kind of wanted to stop for a second. In full transparency, I can't see the rest of your guys' faces. Did you have any questions or have any comments on where we're at right now? Okay, cool beans. We'll keep going. So the program itself, if you're on your own, it could seem like it's a lot to take on. And for the first year, there is more work to be done. But after you do the first year of creating your camp's unique consent policy, it's really easy to just go back and update what you've written in the previous years to make sure that it's still the flavor that you want. Or if you've learned new things by being a educated camp, you can just go in and make some tweaks. One thing that we've done new for educators this year is we have created an entire supplemental workbook. Some of the educators asked for a print off of what the video's content was. So that's what this workbook is. It's really long. Realistically, the focus is right at the end where we give you templates and tools. So that way, when you speak with your theme camp organizers, it makes it much easier to get this process started. I believe one of our educators, who's a second year, used the templates and they got things done within a single day. Some people have to cat herd to get with their theme camp organizers, which adds a few more days to get into your camp meeting. So if you have already signed up to register your camp as a educated camp, you have gone to this link right here, and you're automatically at that first level of an orange educator. So that's something that you can do all on your own. You register your camp, and then you watch the BEDucator program. It's about 2 hours worth of videos, and then you go into the next section, which is going to graduate you to a purple BEDucator, where you go out and you participate. We just went over the 11 principles. Participation's a big one. And you start speaking with your theme camp organizers and get that ongoing agreement to be a BEDucated camp. So there's a few things to do, which is creating your unique consent policy and consent enforcement process. You're going to adopt it after you guys have reviewed and started having the discourse about what consent means in your camp. And then there's a huge portion of the educator program, which is accountability by naming those approved to remove. We're at the camp level, so if there's something that has a camp issue, when we're able to write it down, we can know who might need some teachable moments, or if someone has repetitively been a problem burner within our camp. Sorry, words. So those are really important with not only your own camp, but AZ burners. The COC has been really looking to adopt this BED process if there's something that needs to go to the regional level. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on how they're pairing up with educated camps if you need elevated support. So after you guys have nailed everything down, you've adopted your consent policy and consent enforcement process, you've named those approved to remove, you're going to share it with your camp. So that could be whether you have Discord, if you're using a Facebook group. And when you've done that, you basically just have the bed talk. So when you go to schedule your bed talk, just let us know because we're going to come and bring you some camp swag. We usually have some buttons. Last year we had some bandanas. And then you as the educator get to keep the special bandanas. And the rest of your camp gets to have this bed swag to show off that you're a educated camp. So that's breaking it down into the 3 different sections to be a fully educated camp. So hopefully everyone has already watched all of the videos. If you haven't, that's okay. You might not be familiar with some of the content that is in the BEDucator program itself, like with the consent enforcement process. We will briefly go over it. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask away. So if you need to.
I do have one quick question when I was watching one of the videos.
Yeah.
So I know that within like I'm a registered nurse, so I am a mandated reporter just in my life. Of course, when most people hear that word, they think of like, oh, well, minors, you of course report that to the authorities. Is that my jurisdiction within this space too? I would never want to, unless I of course needed to, violate, somebody's privacy if they don't want to report something. If they, I want to be safe within this space legally, I think. I mean,
That's a great question.
I did a little looking up myself. I mean, technically, yes, I would have to tell the authorities, but I haven't talked to police. So unless I have
Got
to
it.
my job, I guess you said something in one of the videos that rangers have to report, right? Within that
Right.
position. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's as case by case basis. I don't know.
Yeah, if you are a mandated reporter, so walking through, say if there was a sexual assault and someone came to
Right.
you and
I'm thinking like a potentially very serious, egregious situation. I'm thinking for those types of cases, God forbid.
right. If there's something that is to that level and that person wants to report, we encourage going to a ranger who is a mandated reporter rather than taking in those accountability reports yourself. That way, the event with the support that they have can deal with it because they are connected to Burning Man org at large. If someone is going into telling you about it, I would potentially pause just so they're fully informed that you are a mandated reporter and also looking out for yourself and your license. Because if something pops up and you didn't say something, the last thing I would want is for that to go against your license.
Yeah, I feel like it seems like at least initially that a larger camp org level would be involved, probably at that level if that person feels ready to have that conversation, if they ever do. So
100%. And the approved to remove, that's basically, we encourage camp leads to be the ones who are approved to remove because most camp leads are just volunteers and typically are not mandated reporters. If you're one of those people who are going to be approved to remove, I would put next to your name that you're a mandated reporter. So it potentially wouldn't even be you that would be taking in those reports. You're initiating the program for someone to be named as approved to remove, but I wouldn't want you to risk your license. And if someone is coming to you, I would let them know so they have all the information with resources.
absolutely, of course, tell everybody. Yeah, I always do. Yeah, for sure.
Really good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did I hear a hand raise?
I think Connie just said that she is also, so like if you're a teacher, if you're a physician, if you're a nurse, if you're an attorney, I mean, I think that's only if you're dealing with an attorney client situation, but if you're a mandated reporter, you usually know if you are. So
Right. The only time that the rest of us are mandated reporters is if it's with a minor, even if you suspect.
Right, of course.
Guy's got the hard, heavy hitters right at first. I like it. Cool. Well, there's a couple of links here. I'm going to drop them in the chat as we go. There's quite a few, so I'll email them out and put them on the Facebook event page. If you haven't registered, I'm dropping in the link to register and a link to download the workbook. So that's in the chat now. Should have popped in there. Okay, good. All right. So part of the BEDucator program and what we do is we like to have discourse. I know sitting in a training, it's usually one person kind of like talking at, where we like to get everyone thinking about what is our why. So with us, I would like to ask the group, why is consent important to you? And this is part of what it looks like inside of your BEDucator training as a suggestion on getting your camp to start thinking about what consent means to your camp. So I'm going to have us come off mute if you feel comfortable and just ask the really simple question for you guys to shout out, and I'm going to record your answers. Why is consent important?
To have a peaceful event.
Have a peaceful event.
To prevent triggering someone, maybe, and putting them in a freeze position or fight or flight.
So consent is a critical piece for safety, and safety is necessary for freedom and fun.
To foster exploration in a safe way, like being excited to do new things.
And to foster, how did you word that again?
Exploration.
Foster exploration.
Because
Great.
sexual
Feels safe in a given situation.
Sexual coercion is rampant. That's why.
Really good answers. And I'm a terrible speller if you can't tell. Okay, so for us, why is consent important? It's so we can have a peaceful event. It's to prevent triggering someone into a fight, flight, or freeze position. Consent is a critical part for the safety, which is great for freedom and fun. It fosters exploration. It helps us feel safe. And sexual coercion is rampant. That last portion right there, too. Those are all the ways where consent is not freely given, and it's such a high level issue and situational. These are really good answers.
There's a couple more in the chat, Momo.
Oh, thank you for pinging me.
We're just too noisy here, so we have to stay muted.
Oh, no worries. I'll pop back on over. Let's see. Consent is hot. Consent is sexy. Let's go ahead and we'll add that in. I'm going to share this with us afterwards, so it's our group's feelings on why consent is important. Because rules make fun more fun. And to ensure responsible and respectful expression. I love it. Add that one in there too. So let's move on to another question. What is consent?
It's a hell yes or a hell no.
It's a hell yes or a hell no.
Informed and specific.
Informed and specific. Love it. Those are good answers. It's not a hell yes, it's informed, specific.
And consent is specific to what the person receiving acts would be required to know. This includes information about other partners, even if you don't care to disclose it.
I went in there. What about STI status? Fully informed. A little bit harder of a question.
I think we need to be aware too of verbal and nonverbal consent. I think sometimes just, well, she gave me that look or he gave me that look. No, I think it needs to be a verbal.
There's verbal and nonverbal consent, 100%. We lean into it should be a verbal hell yes.
Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic.
Reversible.
Reversible. Look at you guys pulling out your fries. Do you have anything else?
Well, I
It's
was
just
thinking
art.
about what you said with coercion, but freely given, meaning capable of giving consent as well. Freely giving, capable, informed consent. Didn't make sense.
100%. Freely given, meaning that you're capable. So you're not being coerced or manipulated into a yes. You're not being pressured in. You're not intoxicated.
Right. Not impaired. Yes.
There's a couple of comments that touch on that as well.
Consent can be withdrawn at any time. Yes, there's that reversible. Consent is between clear-headed, sober adults. Yep, freely given. No is a complete sentence. Hell yes. Creating agreements, non-negotiable. Consent is subject to change at any time. Yes, great answers. I'm going to copy and paste all these guys in here. Wonderful. Whoa, holy crap. Look at all that. Let's take these out. Thank you guys for participating. This is probably my favorite part of the meeting is getting everybody else's voices as a group. So it's a hell yes or it's a hell no. Informed and specific, consent is specific to the person who is receiving the acts and is required to know, meaning other partners, STIs, verbal, nonverbal. It should be a verbal hell yes, enthusiastic, reversible, freely given, meaning capable of giving consent. Love that. The reason why we put this question into the BEDucator program is because across all the different states, consent is a different definition depending on where you are, right down to going into a courtroom versus how people view it. So you guys as a camp discuss what consent means to you, and that's what we're teaching, with the easiest one being fries, because those values, whether we go by fries or crisp, there's different upgrades to the consent education as people start putting more focus on this. So having the discussion, it sparks curiosity. So thank you for giving the group's definition. We're going to go into two very short ones and we'll move on. Who can practice consent?
Everybody.
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 Everybody. So the practice of consent, do we have any other responses that we don't want to throw out there?
Well, I mean, I think specifically like adults can consent. Children cannot consent, even if they are wanting to. No.
Great points.
I can't consent to another adult.
Right.
Well,
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
I'd say that consent is leading if you're saying children can't, because a child can say that they want to do something, might be play a game with other kids kind of thing, and that's still consent, and that's where we can start with kids, teach them consent at that level.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. And like within other children, within their peer groups, I think children cannot consent to doing adult things with adults.
Yeah.
Right.
Drugs.
Yeah.
But I think that's important though to recognize that I think consent that we're talking about is more than just sexual or even intimate consent.
Absolutely.
This is all types. Consent that
Absolutely.
you want to be sprayed with water as you're walking down the street, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good point. Consent is not just about sex. I love what you guys are bringing up in this discussion. Thank you. So adults can consent, children cannot. I added in sexually consent to another adult, and consent is not just about sex. And we pretty much unanimously agreed everybody can practice consent. Oh, we got the comments in here. Oh, that was what is consent. All right, last question. Who's approved to remove problem members in your camp?
The leaders in the code of conduct lead.
So in our camp, we're going to have the camp lead, but also security, which is going to go through this program.
Okay,
All of our security is required.
great. So we have a COC lead in your camp, Dallas. You have the theme camp organizers again. And then do you have security in your camp?
For me?
Yeah,
Yes, I do. We do.
that's awesome. That's another level. Way
Mhm.
to create a safe space.
We are also making handpicking certain people that can become removers, and of course our camp leads, all of them. So we have a good 20 people that are going to be available for that should it happen, and we've already set in place ways to inform the people who are volunteering how they can reach us.
That's awesome. Usually people get to who's approved to remove problem members in your camp, and it's just, ooh, we haven't thought about that one yet. So it's good to hear. I know both of you are second year educators, right? Dallas and Tanya?
Me?
Oh, this is
No,
your first.
first time.
Wow. Impressed. Way to go. That's a big part, is allowing people to know who to go to when they need help, especially for escalated situations. And for the camp leads to know who they can go to for when things are over their head.
Correct.
Oh, we are flying by this educator trainer. I am very impressed with your guys' answers so far. And I got my screens on two opposite sides. Wonderful. So we went over the 11 principles. We have 10 official principles for Big Burn. For Saguaro Men specifically, consent is the official principle of Saguaro Men. They do call it the 11th, they call it the 0th principle, making 11 principles that we follow. With principles, it is a guide for our culture on how we're supposed to behave. Are we a bunch of scroungy, mean people going into mosh pits? Or are we people that practice civic responsibility by going through trainings like this to make sure that we can have safety third environments and it's still safety and people are leaving with positive experiences and knowing that we have each other's back? Usually principles like LNT are put into place because there was an issue in the first place, like leaving a bunch of trash on the ground like a Coachella festival is not something that is okay within our culture. We talk about consent because it's something that we care about so much, and it has been a problem. So you guys are combating the problem just by going through this educator training and giving us as bed feedback, because us collectively together are bed, and we continuously take your feedback so we can make this better with the experiences that you have to see how we can support you better. So thank you guys for being here. I know I say it a lot. So the first part of the program, and I'm going to breeze through this because we do have 23 minutes and it's mostly the consent education within the videos itself. So there's 5 different sections for you to get some one-on-one consent 101 education this is more of an actionable program for having discourse, like what we just did, asking questions to us as a group. That's a great example on how you and your theme camp can start the discussion. People ask, hey, how do I get people to buy in? It's allowing people to have that voice by asking those questions and really taking in what the response is, so you can get a feel for all the different things that pop up within your own camp. So we have a BEDucator checklist. I am a big person and believer in goals. And if you don't set a date, it's never going to get done. And that's a belief that I live by. So if you have not watched the BEDucator program, if you have a pen and paper or a sticky pad on your computer, I would go ahead and pencil in a goal date on when you're going to finish that by. So that way you can move on to the next step of moving into a purple BEDucator. So going through the concepts that are inside of the BEDucator program, it's just how to create a safe space. And it's showing the people, do we care about them and their safety? If you're a BEDucator, you're writing in a position of leadership and you're working with your theme camp organizers. So that way the space that you're given at Saguaro Man or at Big Burn is the parameter and the principles that you're highlighting that you live by. This is for specifically Saguaro Man. So it's whenever we get there to go set up our camps all the way until we LNT and strike. So once you know the consent enforcement process, we say by BED's definition that you're a consent ambassador. And the consent ambassador is like a loving and free-spirited person that just knows who they can go to when you need help. So for your camp, this is your house. What are the principles that you are going to show that you live by when you get there? And what rules do you have? I know within our Facebook group, some people had some questions about children. Like, is it okay to bring children? We have a whole kids camp. What about the camps that don't want children because they have an 18 plus activation? How do we set those rules at the door and explain it for when anyone needs to know whatever our parameters are in our house? If you're setting up an event, you're going to have more people in your camp that maybe don't know your rules as well. So the consent ambassador, knowing the consent enforcement process, is able to welcome people in, let them briefly know, hey, this is our activation, welcome, please take off your shoes, quote unquote, whatever your rules are at the door. So that way they are informed of what it is and get that early teachable moment just in case. And if you have a consent ambassador that's welcoming people in, you're then identified as someone that knows something around the camp. Doesn't mean that you're the security person, right? But it's someone that is associated with your camp and people know that they can go to you for help. So why do we have consent ambassadors? Why do we have BEDucators? We care about the people within our community so much, and we want to show them that we care, and we want to be able to retain them because that shows that you're providing a wonderful experience, a great camp culture, and we're being preventative to things that can be a problem and have been a problem in the past. So we want to show that we can be hosts not only to our camp mates, but if you're doing a gathering and there's people that maybe don't know your rules, the consent ambassador is the one that can really help you out when it comes to maintaining that culture and then throwing an amazing event. This whole BEDucator program is just a plan of action where hopefully you never have to use it. But if something does happen, it's nice to have something tangible and already in place to show the people that we care if something does go wrong. So I'm going to pause right there and open it up to see if anybody had any questions before we move on. I think someone's
You had a
off
question
mute. In the chat. Can you read it off to me?
What or who is Zendo?
Oh, great question. So Zendo is a peer-to-peer psychedelic support group. They are located at Big Burn on 9NC and 3NC. So say if you're in a distressed state or you're in an altered mindset, this is a great place to go where you have trained volunteers where they can bring you through whatever you're experiencing rather than trying to forcibly take you out of the headspace that you're in. Saguaro Man has a thing that's like Zendo. It's called Tranquility Base or T-Base. So that will be available for our Saguaro Man. Good question.
T-base.
Yeah, they have like fidget toys and things to distract you, and someone's manned there to kind of just get you through whatever it is that you're going through. It's not a drunk take though. Don't drop off your drunk friends there. Is that all the questions that were in the chat?
Yeah, that's all.
Great. Okay. So we had gone over what is consent, and one of the many definitions out there is it's a voluntary agreement to another's proposition. So it could be sexual, or I think it was Bernal who brought up consent isn't just about sex. Like if we go and we take someone's stuff without asking, that's also an example of not getting consent before you use somebody else's physical things. Photos. If someone is usually okay with photos, but now they are less clothed, that could be something that they are not consenting to. And it's good for us to read the room and ask first when we're in a place like Saguaro Man or Burning Man, where some people don't want their default world to know that this is a place that they go and have their own experiences with. So being respectful of that to people's default worlds is a really simple thing that we can do by simply asking. We've gone over a lot of fries. You guys named it. So freely given, like you have to be able to consent. Are you sufficiently sober mind and body? Are you of age to be able to freely give consent, or was someone pressuring you and working you down into a yes? So freely given is something that we want to be able to do with our friends or family members, and especially with our sexual partners, because things can get really muddy, or you could potentially assault somebody if someone is not in a sober state of mind, or if they've been pressured into a yes. So for both parties' sake, we want to be respectful of allowing other people to give an enthusiastic choice. Reversible. Consent can be reversed at any time, at any point of the sexual advancement process, or with, say, letting someone borrow your car. If they act in a different way and then you're like, ooh, this is actually more risk than what I am willing to allow you to do with my vehicle, you're allowed to take that back and reverse your consent at any time. We had gone over informed. So informed is knowing, hey, is there another partner involved here? Are you in a poly relationship? Are you monogamous and you're looking for another partner? Letting the other person make the choice and having all the information that they need for them to feel good about them engaging with whatever activity that you're doing, especially sexually, is going to allow them to make an enthusiastic choice and feel good about the decision so you can have way more fun in the act. We say enthusiastic consent is what we really want to look for, and be enthusiasm detectives. Like if someone is leaning in and they're flirting and they're giving you more than one word answers, those are really good signs that someone is wanting to enthusiastically participate with you. And if someone is showing nonverbal signs, it's great to check in to see if their consent is not enthusiastic consent. And this is just a safe way for us to participate, especially in sexual environments, to see if the person is fully with us. And lastly is specific. We've had a couple examples of people asking for a hug and then going in and giving a kiss. Some people really don't like saliva. We have other people who are neurodivergent, and just being touched really jolts them and freaks them out. So if we go by ask first, hey, can I give you a hug? I challenge everyone to start doing that if you don't already. I used to never ask people for hugs. And then when I started doing it and I got my first no, it really took me back on, wow, I thought I was just being friendly and welcoming, but I was actually hurting a few people in the process by thinking that I was being radically inclusive. So asking first is really going to make it to where you're not upsetting anybody's personal choice. So with consent, we talked a little bit earlier on how consent has been evolving with time. So we have seen some in the default world, some poster porto projects or consent campaigns with postering. We have heard consent education go from no means no. We've heard that at one point. We've heard consent is sexy. We said it in this training. We've heard enthusiastic consent is what we're looking for. And just to keep you guys informed, people are now saying authentic consent is the full embodiment of what consent should be, because not all the time consent is enthusiastic. Like if you're married for 30 years and you're going to bed and it's like it's a yes and it's not enthusiastic, but authentic consent is fully being able to make the choice when you're going into sexual consent. So we're talking about consent enforcement at the camp level. With enforcement, what we're doing is we're strengthening a boundary. So with consent, we like to say consent equals respect. And it's not like, oh my gosh, I look up to you so much and respect you. It is basic human respect. So if we're going and we're asking people if we can give them a hug, if we can give them a kiss on the cheek, or if we can go over and slap their ass, I've always said, if you wouldn't do it to someone in a coffee shop, why would you do it to a stranger at a burn? If you ask first, you're showing other humans that basic human respect. And the reason why we have the consent enforcement process is when people aren't honoring the basic human consent, and we need to enforce the process so we keep our community a consensual and safety third one where people feel safe enough to explore. So consent enforcement process, it's a 3-step process, and this can be used at the individual level. And later when we go into our written consent enforcement process, it cycles all over again. So these are the boundaries of our camp. We say the hey, how's it going is a verbal tool to just check in and not be a bystander. The real meat and potatoes is our second step that we call the teachable moment. And then the last step is removal, and that could be a temporary or permanent removal. So before moving on, does anyone want to take a crack at what is the bystander effect?
What's happening inside that piece?
It can diffuse a situation 99% of the time, according to your paperwork. Just redirect the conversation a little bit and maybe lighten it, change the dynamics.
100%. Yeah, most of the time when you go over and you give a hey, how's it going? We might think, oh, something's going on that's wrong. Where I've learned time and time again, when I give a hey, how's it going, by not assuming something's wrong, usually something isn't. But say if my spidey senses aren't picking up on something, just being simply present, like what you were saying, that can diffuse things that we don't even know about. So really good. You put it right there. 99% of the time, this is where it ends. So we don't want to assume that ill intent, and we want to make sure that the first hey, how's it going is to ourselves. Because say if we are in an intoxicated state and we're like, oh man, I think I might actually escalate this situation by going and giving a hey, how's it going? Maybe you're not the capable individual and you can tap a ranger and have them check on things since they are trained in de-escalation practices. So making your presence known is something that we can do where naturally, if one person walks by a situation, it kind of triggers that second person that sees a situation or potential situation to also do the same thing, and then no one comes in to help. By saying, hey, how's it going? It's a really easy way to make a new friend if everything was fine, or to move on to step 2 if you're feeling, my spidey senses are feeling a little off here. So if there needs to be a verbalization of our community boundaries, the teachable moment is just that. The example that I like to use when it comes to the tone of the teachable moment is we once didn't know what moop meant or poop. So moop is matter out of place. That's a word that burners made up. Same thing with poop, people out of place. Outside in the default world, people will have no idea what you're talking about. Someone had to teach us that. They either did it in a camp meeting or you left trash on the ground and someone redirected the behavior because we live by the principle, leave no trace. It's directing our behavior to what our community standards are so we can continue to go to this environment that's not trashed, that is a place that we care about and that we like to clean up after. So if we're seeing something and we need to help ourselves or help another burner and let them know, we fall back on, we're an ask first community and consent is a principle that we practice at Saguaro Man. You can open up the conversation, because say if there's a new burner and they've never had the opportunity to talk about consent, Burning Man was the first time I ever discovered what consent culture even was. And it made me curious and I started looking into it. So it can be this, hey, here's our boundary, and then open up the dialogue if that's something that they want to engage in. I hear someone off mute. Did you have a question? Nada. Okay, moving on. So we give the teachable moment. We get to gauge the situation. Are they receptive to learning, or is it something that they do again and they disregard, where we have to go into what's called the removal stage? So removal is the way that we can hold accountability, and removal could be something as simple as, you need to take a break right now. For burners that have gone to plenty of burns, I know Calamity's said this to me before, hey, go drink some water. That's burner talk for like, you're being a bit of an asshole, go get some water in your body and then come back and we can try again. So that could be a temporary removal where it doesn't have to be the sting. For things that are more severe, this is why we have those approved to remove. If these, we encourage, camp leads are the ones that are getting the camps together, rounding them, or if you're like a Tanya and you have security in your camp going the extra mile, these are the people that decided, hey, we are going to be responsible for the power that we do have, which is disinviting people back into the camp. So if someone does need to be removed, say if they're overly intoxicated, the name of the game is always de-escalation. We don't want to escalate any situations because most of us are not professional security guards. We don't know how to safely take someone down. We want to make sure we know our resources, like going and grabbing a ranger. If someone is being a problem, having one person stay with them, point to another burner, and have them go get help, because we should never do removal alone. It's a skill set that we want to make sure that we're looking out for ourselves first, and then we're going to our regional resources if you need any type of permanent removals done, especially at a burn. Most of the time, incidents will pop up and accountability reports will be written after burn. So the things that we have control over is that disinviting back to camp. So why do we do this? Accountability. So if we're foreshadowing that consent is a principle that we stand by having our consent policy that's unique to your camp, a process in place for if somebody is going to overstep someone's boundaries, especially when it comes to consent in a sexual manner, we don't have accountability in the default world. There's some practices in place, but most people are not going to be held accountable. So this is you doing your part with a situation that's so high level that if there was something that was already working, we'd have it. So you as the BEDucator are working with BED and your experiences on how we can make this better for our community. And it's an example of what we could potentially do in the default world. When we go to Burning Man and the experiences that we have and foster, we have a goal usually of bringing that back into the default world. What we're doing here with BED, if we can change just little pockets of our environment at Burning Man, Saguaro Man, and in our real default world, it's going to be that ripple that hopefully changes people getting hurt, especially in a sexual manner. So at Saguaro Man, we do have some resources, and then I'll point out right here, when you enter in to the gate, you'll get all checked in. You're either going to go over here by the flower, or you're going to go back over here by center camp. Oops, excuse me. Right along this portion, if you're walking down towards center camp, is typically where medical and tranquility base is going to be, including ranger headquarters. Just to let you guys know, this area, if you're having any issues, is where you'll want to go if you need any immediate attention. If you're on this side of Saguaro Man, Gate also has a radio that will go to the rangers. This year, for the first time, BED will be on radio. So if you don't want to talk to a mandated reporter, there will be a BED head on radio. if you need that assistance from us. So there is the camp conduct lead, addressing power dynamics. A lot of the times, people in leadership are the ones that feel like they're the untouchables, right? So by creating this position of the camp conduct lead, what we do is have accountability reports that can go to your theme camp organizers. But if there's an issue with a theme camp organizer, the camp conduct lead will take in a report about leadership and step in as a TCO if the consent enforcement process needs to be executed minus one of the theme camp organizers. So I'm going to drop in a couple links into the chat so you guys, I know we're getting a little low on time, can make a copy of these accountability reports yourself. So these are yours. It'll force you to make a copy. And the way that we say to do this is TCOs have their own link, and then the person who is the camp conduct lead has their own link. So that way TCOs don't read camp conduct lead reports. That way it keeps it anonymous to the person that they're making the report about. So that person can go through a, hey, how's it going, and a teachable moment. And if a vote on removal needs to happen, then that can be executed. So since we have unleashed the BEDucator program to AZ Burners and Big Burn, AZ Burners has really doubled down in wanting to help with the code of conduct team. So all of the BEDucated camps, because you have this consent enforcement process, if there's something that is high level enough to go to regionals because there is a problem burner that is dangerous to our events, they are looking for the accountability reports that we have written, so it helps with the investigation. So if there is someone who is that dangerous, what we're trying to do is keep the rest of our community members safe, and it helps the COC team when they go and they reach out and give their hey, how's it going for the investigations. Just to let you guys know, it is completely confidential when you do make these COC reports. They also are not available for personal issues. So they're not mom and dad, right? This is for serious stuff where the reports are going to take quite a minute for them to do the investigation. That's something that they want to be made very clear. They are welcome to having reports. And if you do write one, it'll go on a watch list if it's not investigation worthy. Is that a great way to say it? So the reports do need to be made within 60 days of the incident. If it's something related to sexual assault, it's allowed to go outside of that 60 days because typically survivors take a long time to come forward with the people that have sexually assaulted them. So you guys as BEDucated camps are in the know of AZ Burners really putting a focus on the COC team. And, lost my train of thought there. So this is not the AZ Burners board of directors. The COC team is a group of individuals separate from the board. And say if you make a COC report, they have their own process that acts like the camp conduct lead, where they will have a board member step in place of one of the COC members if the report that you're making is with someone on that team. And I know we're at time, so if anyone has to leave, go on ahead and dip on out. Does anyone have any questions with this new portion of the COC? Because this is brand spanking new. Is there anything in the chat?
You know, and the reason for the 60 days is I'm part of that COC team, and we've had difficulty with ones that go further out that, you know, things become fuzzy. People don't remember. You know, and we had a case here where I believe we had 8 or 9 witnesses that had to be interviewed. So, you know, it's a case where time is of the essence, and I really need to know that. And just by the way, the principle 0, we came up with that at one of our meetings that we were having and really felt that that was the principle of enthusiastic consent is what we called it. And we've invited Momo and Danger Kitty to be a part of our COC team because, again, they're an integral part of this. And the other piece, I guess, that I'll mention is that these are, the COC complaints and filings are for sanctioned AZ burner events or a BEDucated event. We put that piece in there too. So if it's not a BEDucated event, then attendees should be aware that, boy, if this isn't BEDucated, I don't know, I don't feel so safe. So that was the reason we put that in, because we've gotten into private pool parties. I mean, a variety of different, situations and environments where really, it wasn't anything to do with Arizona burners. Just so happened to be a couple burners, but, we want to kind of identify it as a BEDucated event, and therefore then it would fall under the COC. But very happy that, BED has, agreed to be a part of our committee, because I think it goes hand in hand, all of this.
Thanks for being here and stepping in. So,
No problem.
great. Yeah, the extra portions on there, really appreciate you wanting BED to be a portion of the COC process, especially when it's outside of, say, Saguaro Man or Ignite. This is a great way to tap into the community and have some sort of formal process. So if something is happening within our community and its members, if you are a BEDucated event and you're registered with BED, at least in Arizona, this is a model that's really new with the leadership of BED and the COC and Arizona Burners on how we can bring this out into the default world even more. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, so we went over, oh, did someone have a comment? Nah. I'm going to breeze through this a little bit more quickly because this is towards the end of your workbook. So when you go and start contacting your theme camp organizers to be a BEDucated camp, this is the actual getting into the community within your camp to create your consent enforcement process and your consent policy. This is going to have you name those approved to remove and then send it out to your camp members. So what kind of communication devices are you using? Is it going to be Discord? Is it going to be Google Meet or Facebook groups? We have already gone through what it could look like when you do your theme camp organizer meeting by going over those questions. Why is consent important? What is consent? Who can practice consent? And who is approved to remove problem members in our camp? It really gets that discourse going so that way you can fill out the rest of the examples. Because we're getting short on time, I'm just going to quickly drop this into the chat for you guys to have. When you download your workbook, you will get these templates that allow you to overview the consent enforcement process. It forces you to make a copy. And then you're able to edit away. So these are your copies, even from the link that was dropped into the chat. So things in red, you can change that to Saguaro Man, Baggy Man. You're able to put the names of those approved to remove, the camp conduct lead. Here's your consent enforcement process that you could then send out to the camp. It also has those two different accountability reporting tools, one for camp leads, one for the camp conduct lead. And for Burning Man, it does come with a resource guide. So if this is being watched by anyone who has a regional that is not Saguaro Man, it's good to check in and see where medical and rangers are, because that's at basically every regional, and seeing if there's things like Zendo, where here in Arizona, we have T-Base or Tranquility Base. So this is going to make things much, much easier when you go through, have the discourse, ask the questions, and then figure out who are we going to put onto our consent enforcement process. We had one of our BEDucators change the word enforcement because they didn't like it. This is for you. Totally editable to the unique flavor of your camp. Because we are getting really close, or we're already over time by 7 minutes, this is going to be your biggest bread and butter. If you haven't done so already, we have moved the BEDucator program over to bedtalks.org, where you can watch the videos. It recaps everything that we've talked about, and the workbook towards the end, that's where you're going to get the tools in order to create your unique consent policy and consent enforcement process. So make sure at the end you do the bed swag request so we can come and deliver you some buttons for saying thank you for caring about consent within our culture and within your camp specifically. With BED, we do keep a record of like, these are our BEDucated camps. We love shouting people out as long as that's okay with everybody. And if there are some things that happen, the COC team can look and see, oh, they're a BEDucated camp. Did they write an accountability report since they've gone through the BEDucator training? So that's a portion where we love your feedback. If you do end up needing to write an accountability report that goes to the COC regional level and how that's working out. I did just join and Raisin here, who's been on the COC team. So we are fully open to feedback, and I'm not a mandated reporter. If there's any way that we can do better, all ears. Well, we're going to cut the training short there. It was a little bit longer, and I'm going to send out the recording in our voices from the collective exercise that we did with why is consent important. If you have your theme camp organizers here in the meeting tonight, that could be a really easy way to customize your consent policy. But I really appreciate you guys caring about this. I know it's not just one day to go through the BEDucator program, get with your TCOs, talk about why consent is important, and now being connected to the regional level with your consent enforcement process and accountability reporting. So this is a big deal, and I'm really proud of you guys for being here and doing this extra support training. So thanks for taking care of yourselves.
Thank
Bye,
you, Mama.
everybody. See you out
Bye-bye.
there. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.